Interesting. I think part of the reason why it was so extraordinary for him as a young president to say the torch is being passed to the next generation, and to say the famous phrase, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, is it was already welling up in the late 50s, a desire to move forward. The civil rights movement was making strongholds, and there was a lot of feeling that we needed to work together. And then the signature program becomes the Peace Corps, which was an answer to what you can do for your country. And what it meant was somehow throughout the 60s, that sense that individuals could make a difference. You know, the sad thing is we so often remember the 60s with the assassinations of JFK and RFK and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and the riots in the streets and the fires in the streets. And yet the greatest spark of the 60s was that belief that individuals held through much of that decade that they could make a difference. And when people feel that there's a collective idealism and you can move your country forward to the ideals that you're fighting for, it's a really extraordinary moment. And as I was saying much earlier, that's when social justice changes. And I think that's what we need to remember about him, not the sadness of it. And maybe that's why that feeling for him is still alive, because it's connected to the feeling that we want to feel as individuals, that we can work together to make a difference. And he somehow sparked that feeling in that inauguration and in his whole persona.
Well, you talk about the assassinations of that moment, Doris, and for many Americans, it frankly felt like the country was coming apart. My parents have said that. And some people actually see echoes of that period in today's political climate, given the fact that we have seen this uptick in political violence. How do you see it?
Well, you know, it's when I look back at that time of 1963, and when I later worked for Lyndon Johnson, he told me that he couldn't imagine a more difficult time. I mean, not only had the assassination taken place, but it had taken place in his state of Texas, and then Oswald had been killed, and people are watching all this on real time. And he said, I don't know how in the world he'll be able to unite the country. He knew that people didn't have a great sense of trust in him, especially coming from the South, when the major issue at that time was the Civil Rights Bill that was formally introduced by JFK in June of 1963, was the main issue before the country. And again, we think of the assassination, but we have to think of what happened after that. And the extraordinary thing was that when Lyndon Johnson took office, he made the decision the night he took office as president after John Kennedy died, that he would make the priority, his number one priority, the passage of that Civil Rights Bill. And his friend said, you can't do that. It'll never get passed. There'll be a filibuster. You'll get nothing through the Congress. You'll go before the country if you want to be president in 11 months from now, and you'll have nothing to achieve. You only have a certain amount of currency to expend, and you better not expend it on this. And then he famously said, then what the hell is the presidency for? And then he went for it, and he had talents, interestingly, that maybe John Kennedy wouldn't have had to get it through Congress. He started calling every congressman, every senator. He would call them at 6 in the morning. He would call them at noon. He would call them at midnight. He even called a senator at 2 a.m. And he said, oh, I hope I didn't wake you up. And the senator said, oh, no, I was just lying here looking at the ceiling, hoping my president would call. But then he would tape these conversations, and he would know what these people needed to make a deal. So he would keep track of what he could do for them, dams, public works projects, you need this, I'll go to there. And he gets to Everett Dirksen, the minority leader of the Republicans, and the arguments between them are so incredible. Finally, he says to him, after promising him everything, I'll be in Peoria, I'll be in Springfield, I'll go wherever you want me to go. And then he says, you know, Everett, if you come with me and you bring Republicans to help break the filibuster, because obviously they needed Republicans because the Democratic Party was split in two. He said, 200 years from now, school children will know only two names, Abraham Lincoln and Everett Dirksen. How could Dirksen resist? He brings the Republicans, they break that filibuster, the Civil Rights Act passes, ending 78 years of Jim Crow. And maybe there was the combination. In fact, when he went to the country and said it was my number one priority, he said nothing would be more important for the memory of John F. Kennedy than passing that bill. So it was John Kennedy inspiring and Lyndon Johnson making it happen.
And your late husband, Dick Goodwin, was also a part of that pivotal moment.
Hey, it's been